Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the YES Cafe again for another live internet stream. The format will be much the same as before. I'm going to speak for a wee bit, slightly off the cuff today, and then Sam's going to speak again, and then we'll just take questions from the room, and there's usually some questions coming online from people using the feed there. My name is Neil Hay. I am the candidate for the SNP in the South for Westminster on May the 7th. The selection process has only just completed this week, so we now know all our candidates. And even in that period, that short period within that week, there's rather a lot has gone on and rather a lot has happened. So we'll cover a wee bit of that and why I think the SNP are the correct vehicle for building Scotland's priorities and the work that we did last year as well. There is already a bit of a legacy from the referendum campaign in that the energy is still there. The interest in politics is still there. It was galvanised. And it'll all come back when we start running through this campaign as well. Already we know the membership rise within the SNP. We know the Greens and the Scottish Socialist Party got good rises as well. But people are actively coming out to campaign already. You know, they've been waiting on the chance since September to get back on the horse and get out there and carry on with us. Things that have gone on. Is that my own phone? No.
Is there music coming from the speaker as well?
That could be it.
Could maybe kill that.
This week we saw the budget in Holyrood. It passed successfully, but not without objection from the other parties, predominantly Labour. So in a budget, a 12 billion budget invested in Scotland's NHS, they still objected. We're making more funds available to local authorities to commit to protect teacher numbers, and they still objected. We provided within that budget a rates relief package for small businesses to the tune of 615 million, and they objected to that budget. So we're already in seeing a pattern here that's just continuing from before, where we have objection for objection's sake. But it's good that we see it now, and we know what's going to come with it. Additionally, that budget had a £330 million investment in Scotland's schools infrastructure, and another 140 million in investment through NPD, not-for-profit development, to help develop college campuses as well. So it's a really big, balanced, constructive budget that was passed this week. But again, it was still objected to. Strangely, we have Labour who have come forward in the previous few weeks with some of their own proposals. Uncosted, not balanced, such things as 1,000 more nurses, which we haven't quite managed to find out yet more than what. 1,000 more nurses doesn't really mean anything until you know what your start point is. So apparently it's just 1,000 more than the SNP have said. We haven't said a figure yet, so we could be waiting for a wee while till we find out what 1,000 more, what it means. The other thing that's going to prove a problem for them is that was to be funded on the back of a mansion tax, predominantly aimed at the southeast of England and London. Now, I don't think anybody in their right mind thinks that within the Labour Party, within the Tories, and within the people in the southeast of England, they're all going to think that's a great idea. Not just the southeast of England, because what about the nurses in Liverpool? What about the health service in Newcastle, in Yorkshire? They're going to want to have a say in where that mansion tax fund goes as well. So another one, and just another example of not particularly well thought out policy. But in Westminster in the last couple of weeks as well, we've had 3 significant votes that have gone on. And they're significant in general, but they're also significant to this constituency for the manner in which our current MP voted within those motions. The media will help it in that that message won't particularly get out too strongly to us as to how that voting has gone, but we know how it went. So we have Ian Murray here as our MP currently. I don't know Ian personally, so it's entirely what I say is entirely based upon his voting record and the principles that we see in front of us from how he acts in Parliament. Unbelievably, a Labour MP for Edinburgh South voted with the Tories on austerity. Further £30 billion worth of cuts to public services, and we voted with the Tories to push that through. Not an abstention, not that he didn't turn up, he actively voted with and voted for that motion. We saw on fracking, another one of the policies that Labour suddenly jumped in with. Fairly clearly they knew that the SNP policy was coming, so they jumped in 2 feet before it and made a big issue of the moratorium on fracking, and fracking was going to be suspended until such times as more investigation and safety issues and things like that were addressed. Well, that was Scottish Labour that said that, because when we went back down to Westminster, the motion was let run. So the Conservative motion that went through Westminster was just left to do so with abstentions from the Labour MPs, including the MP for Edinburgh South, Ian Murray. However, previously he had said he was against fracking. He's on record as having said that. So on that occasion he just abstained. The third one that was that came up was on Trident. Now bear in mind here that Labour are arguing about 1,000 nurses. You can get 150,000 nurses for the cost of renewing Trident. But Ian Murray didn't vote. He campaigned in this constituency for his election, and one of the things he campaigned on was the fact he was against the party line and he was happy to stand up and condemn weapons of mass destruction. Then he was elected and the opinion moved from, well yeah, but there's no point in us getting rid of them if everybody else still has them. And then we come all the way around full circle, well not full circle, polar opposite to where we were when he had the opportunity to vote against, well it was actually voting for the motion. The motion was to say we do not want renewal of Trident, so he could have voted for the motion and he wasn't there. So 3 core issues there that all affect us as a constituency, and I don't think any of us would feel that the voting that went on there particularly represented us as constituents here. 4.2 billion, before they get to making a decision on whether we renew Trident, 4.2 billion will be spent on that project to prepare the information to work out whether it's a viable project. 4.2 billion. It's frightening. So, what else has happened? We had the vow. We had the vow last year, then we had the vow plus. This might not work on camera, but hands up if you know what the vow plus means. No, no one's particularly clear what that vow plus means either. I haven't got a clue what it means. What we do know is the rather feeble attempt at proposals to the Smith Commission from some of the other parties. What they included in their suggestions that should be in the Smith Commission was fairly pitiful. So to submit next to nothing, then argue for next to nothing within the Smith Commission review, to have the Smith Commission come out and then suddenly say, do you know what, see if we were in power, be loads more. It's never going to wash. I mean, we're out canvassing, banging on the doors and things just now, and the people who are there that we're speaking to, who have, not, fair enough, not everybody has a great interest in politics, and it passes some people by, but the people who have the interest in politics, this is not fooling anybody. It really isn't. We just need to keep out on the doors and make sure we keep those conversations and we keep people aware of the fact, because it'll carry on. It'll carry on. It won't stop just here. The other thing that's coming up regularly on the doors is the polling and the manner in which the figures are showing fantastic projections for us at the moment. Personally, I would draw short of those, taking those as conclusions. That's where we're going to be. I mean, some of them are just beyond wildest dreams, really. However, they are all pointing in the same direction, to different extents, different rates, and the Ashcroft, the Lord Ashcroft poll that came out, there was a specific constituency poll. Okay, it didn't feature too big in the East, but the specific constituency poll was absolutely phenomenal, and it was a big cross-section, it's a big sample group that was polled for each of the constituencies. And for that to come out predicting 53 seats, it's just unbelievable. And that really will have put the wind up all the other parties. I haven't seen the usual Sunday press releases and TV there'll be this morning, but I imagine the central focus around those conversations will be those polls and what they're going to do about it. We saw last year that when they're backed into a corner, they'll come out fighting, and they'll use everything that they can come out and throw at us. I mean, from some of the scares and the threats on the extent of what an SNP government would mean, all the way down to, you know, Friday there they started a smear campaign against one of the candidates through in the West. She's a politics student. She's actually standing against Douglas Alexander. And they went to the extent of trawling all the way through our social media sites, our Facebook and our Twitter, to see if they could find something that they could use against her. Now we're at that stage now. It'll get extremely colourful towards the end of this campaign. It is, in our campaign, it is absolutely key. Not everybody can do every job and go canvassing, etc. But even in conversations and doorsteps and in the pub and in the cafe and wherever you happen to be, it is absolutely key that we keep that one-to-one conversations going. We keep those messages getting out there. I'll take this opportunity to have a drink. All right. So, what difference can we make at Westminster? For years and years it's always been kind of felt, you know, we go down, it's a bit of a protest when we're down there, we get our MPs get the extremely occasional chance to stand up and say something, usually what's answered has got nothing to do with the question they just asked, and then it's sit down and back in the box. This time round it's completely different, completely different. We need an alternative to austerity. We need an alternative to the cuts programme that's in place. We need to campaign that they do not replace Trident. They do not squander that money that is desperately, desperately needed elsewhere for public services. We need to progress the powers of Home Rule. We need to work to that before it goes cold and we lose all the impetus and we lose the momentum that we have towards it. Again, on the doors, yesterday when I was on the doors, we had 40% of the people who I canvassed used to vote Labour. Not a single one of them will vote Labour this time. Made me smile as well. I felt like clapping on the doorstep too, but you can't really. But we need to move on as well. We need to be in a position where we can take moves and to secure and protect our industries that we're particularly strong in here. The topical one for looking at is obviously oil and gas at the moment. That because of some out there worldwide argument and dispute between superpowers, we as a country are, well, we've got the Andy Murray gas syndrome going on at the moment. Through the referendum, loads of oil and gas, it's British. Price drops, Scottish. See, same syndrome when Andy Murray's winning. And also, safeguarding our place in Europe. We have to make sure we're on the front foot there as well, and you know there's a proposal there that will come up for debate that all 4 component parts of the UK have to agree that we come out. It's no use us voting to be in Europe as a nation as Scotland and then being dragged out because they voted to leave elsewhere. And when we look at the splits, the population splits around the country, there's a huge volume of people down there in the southeast that could really strongly determine how that vote goes, and that is just one small pocket. So we need to work from now, from when we get down there in May with the numbers. Also, there are other things that we can do that will impact as well. We would be looking for a bill to protect the English NHS. We probably wouldn't propose and raise that bill, but we would most certainly be looking to support it. It's not just a case of protecting them from themselves. It impacts greatly on us too because of the public spending. Our money, our pocket money that we get back is based predominantly upon public spending. So the more you privatise, the more you sell off and you lower the government's public spending, the less we get back. And in the Smith Commission, don't let anybody be fooled on that. The Smith Commission's fairly categoric that it says there'll be no more money. It's just moving money around different ways, and we get to spend our pocket money slightly differently. So it's not a case of the Smith Commission suddenly releasing loads of funds to us that we've generated ourselves. It is very much the case of we can just choose to spend what they give us a wee bit differently. But we've already seen, we've got the 2 main dinosaur parties down there, and one of them, I don't know who thinks these up, but they must be on a lot of money. One of them says, vote SNP, get the Tories. And the other one, after a big powwow, he says, vote SNP, get Labour. Well, these are powerful executives, these guys that are coming up with this. So we know where they're going to pitch. It's not imaginative. It's no longer even truthful. You know, we know the statistics there of how infrequently the impact of how Scotland votes reaches Westminster. I can't remember exact stats, but it's next to never that it's ever made any difference how we voted down there. But this time could significantly change it because they seem fairly eeksy-peeksy at the moment. There's not much in them, so we may well hold that balance of power. Every chance that we will hold that balance of power. Now within those negotiations, we have categorically said we will never deal with the Tories to put a Tory government in Westminster. Within that, you can take as read UKIP as well. We have said that we would speak to Labour. So we would speak to Labour, we haven't run out and said coalition. Only Labour have said coalition. So that's maybe one of the smarter moves, that they suddenly start saying, well, we'd get a coalition with the SNP. We haven't said that. We've spoken about a supply and confidence arrangement whereby, issue by issue, we work through negotiation with them. But we haven't come out and said we would go into a coalition with them. On a slightly political side, we haven't said we wouldn't, but it's them who put forward the idea of coalition. For all Labour's rushing in, thinking they know what we're going to say, and then try and claim it 4 or 5 days before the SNP announcement, strangely enough, the one they have not matched is to say that they will not do a deal with the Tories to get into government. And when Labour won't distance themselves from forming a government or an arrangement with the Tories, there's something far wrong. There is something far wrong. We don't particularly want to be associated with that. You know, we are a very different party. We're a different society. We're an embracing multicultural society and party. We are a progressive one as well. We welcome people based upon, doesn't matter your gender, your race, your creed, your sexuality. You are all welcome. There is no stigma. There's no discrimination. Everybody is there. And even this week, Nicola was talking about the LGBTI group and how we support them and don't let policy from down south pass and come through that impacts upon them. We have a good formation there coming with the other smaller parties who are hoping to do well in Westminster as well, through the Greens and Plaid Cymru. And I can't be the only one who's really looking forward to seeing the 3 female leaders of those parties in the TV debates up against the 4 on duffers. All stuffy there in their suits, and let the 3 of them put them under the spotlight. I think the difference between that and watching Clegg, Miliband and Cameron on the telly is just night and day. We don't have yet a big media support. Obviously social media, we have a good high presence, and that's very popular, and we get a good message out there. What we do have obviously is the national.
Yes.
Now, I would encourage everybody to support the national. It had a splash, and then as new things do, it kind of tailed down and levelled off a wee bit. But buy the national, subscribe to the national, read the national, and leave it wherever you are. It's a great way, it's a great tool and a great means of physically leaving hard copy somewhere that other people can read. I'm basically all but done. Sam's going to speak. I think probably we'll just do the questions all together on the end. Yeah. So with no more ado, Sam Shackleton.
Well, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be invited to speak here again, and it is always a privilege to speak alongside our fantastic candidate Neil Hay. And congratulations! Congratulations on your selection for candidacy as well. It'll be great to have you representing us down in Westminster. Now, as I have said before, I've never really been one for long speeches or talks, so I'm going to try and keep this relatively short and to the point to leave some time for questions at the end. Well, I suppose I'll begin by talking with you briefly about me, about who I am, how I got involved in the YES movement, because I know some of you weren't here for my last talk. So, without further ado, a little bit about me. In the beginning, when the referendum was announced, I was quite dubious of the whole thing. You know, politics at that point didn't really have any appeal to me as a young teenager growing up in Edinburgh, but you know, I never really felt empowered to get involved in the political process in any way. But I think, you know, the more I got involved in the YES movement and the SNP, the more my attitude towards politics began to change. I began to appreciate everything that the SNP and the Yes movement were trying to achieve for Scotland, and I became encouraged as I saw more and more young people around me getting passionate and involved in politics. I began to attend Yes rallies, engage in many a passionate debate with friends and family, as I'm sure a lot of you have done as well, and in the end I went on to speak at several rallies after the referendum. Now today I'm going to be talking about the Yes movement and how we move forward in the run-up to the general election. I'm going to talk about the area in which I've had the most involvement in, which is how we can encourage the younger voters to get involved in politics and engage in the political process. Initially, after the referendum defeat, I was very worried that the Yes movement would break up. I saw these different groups and factions forming, and I was worried that that would just pull the Yes movement apart. But I think what we've seen since September has really been amazing. And I think this Yes Hub is testament to that, and I'd like to thank everyone who works and runs this Yes Hub, because it's a really great place for the movement. I think this Yes Hub really represents what this movement has been all about, which is just regular and ordinary people working together, I think in a way in which this nation really hasn't ever seen before. I think we can work and build on the energies and efforts of the grassroots campaign of the Yes movement, and I think if we channel that behind the SNP, I think that would be great if we can channel the passion and energy of the Yes movement behind the SNP, because they're really the only party in Scotland that can truly represent Scottish interests. Now today I'm going to be talking about moving forward. As I'm sure you're all aware, the general elections are fast approaching, and I think all the opinion polls so far, as Neil said, are looking good for us, such as the Ashcroft poll it was published the other day there. But I think it's important not to get complacent with these polls, because as we've seen in the referendum, a lot of things can change from here until the referendum day. But I think what these polls have proven is that there is not a single seat in Scotland that the SNP can't realistically take. And I think it's up to us to really, push forward for the SNP, and I think that's where we come in. Up over here. This is the first time in the history of our nation that we can really make a difference in the political process again. The Better Together campaign often threw about this phrase in the referendum that this decision would be the most important decision we'd ever have to make in a lifetime. They always sort of demeaned us in that sense, but I don't think that at all. I disagree with that. I think the most important decision we have to make now is the decision to get an overwhelming SNP majority down to Westminster in May. I think that's the most important decision, and that does bring us to the topic at hand, which is the general election. We're on the run-up to the most significant general election vote that I think Scotland will ever have to make. This is really going to be make or break now, I think, for the Yes movement and the SNP. We have a clear choice now to kick out the Red Tories, which I like to use that word, formerly known as Labour, from Scotland, and we can fill their seats with a massive SNP majority, and I think that really is possible. We can do that if we really channel our efforts. As a nation, Scotland has voted for Labour in every general election since 1955, but for 38 years of that we have been subject to Tory governments that we effectively didn't vote for, and I think that we need to convince people not to make that same mistake again. This year we could really make a difference, and by backing SNP in the upcoming elections, I think we really could hold the balance of power over the parties down in England. Now, as I've said before, I'd hazard a guess in saying that probably everyone that's sitting in this room, I'd imagine, is here because we all share a common goal. We all share a common aspiration, so to speak. We wouldn't be sitting in this room together if we didn't want Scotland to be an independent country. I think that's important to remember, because for me, that is and always will be the #1 goal for the SNP in the long run and the Yes movement. I think the referendum, it was, simply a setback in the run-up to independence, and as Nicola Sturgeon said, I think the 1.6 million people who voted yes were simply the base camp. I think that all it takes really is for us to make the climb together, and I definitely think that's the climb that we can make alongside the SNP. Now, moving on to the SNP, I've heard a lot of varied opinions on the SNP throughout my involvement in the Yes movement. I mean, initially it was, oh, I don't trust that Alex Salmond, and I'm sure you heard that thousands of times, and you know, there has been a lot of varied opinions, but I think it's gotten to the point now where it would really be hard to deny that the SNP are the only party that can represent Scottish interests in Westminster. I mean, I think you know, it's the point was proven when Joanne Lamont left Labour because it was being ran like a London branch office. I think that proves SNP's point fantastically. And I think Labour and Conservatives have really time and time again failed the Scottish people. And now, as I've often said in my speeches, I think it doesn't really matter what party you support, and I think that's the amazing thing about the SNP, especially in the general election. It doesn't matter if you're a Green supporter or an SSP supporter. I think the rallying cry now is for everyone to join behind the SNP, everyone who was involved in the Yes movement, to really put our energies behind the SNP. And then obviously there's Holyrood election, but I think regardless if you're a Green supporter, if you're an SSP supporter, you know, or even a Labour supporter, I think the realistic party to support if you want Scottish interests represented in Westminster is the SNP. We've seen a quarter of young Scottish voters joining political parties since the end of the referendum, and that is truly an amazing statistic. I'd hazard a guess in saying that a large majority of those of Scotland's youngest voters have joined the SNP. Like, you know, myself and many of my friends I know have joined the SNP as well. And I think it's up to everyone who's a bit older is to take an active role in encouraging young Scots to get involved in the political process. And I think a good start would be for encouraging young Scots to encourage them to get involved with other young people who are passionate about politics. You know, things like the SNP students. I was at the national conference with SNP students the other week there, and it was really great to see, you know, other young people passionate about politics. And you know, if they're at university or even Edinburgh College, there's one starting up in Edinburgh College. You know, to encourage them to get involved with other young people, because I know when I was younger anyway, if anyone you know, came up in a suit usually and said, oh, you must get involved in politics, I would just tune out, my mind would just blank. And I think what's really inspired me is seeing all these other young people in the referendum getting passionate about it, and then you have discussions and debates with them, and then they really encourage you as well. So I think that's the main thing, is to encourage younger people to get involved with other young people that think the same and that are passionate about politics. I think Scotland's attitude really has changed. The referendum, as I've said many a time, the referendum's reignited the flame that once burned in the hearts of the Scottish people, both young and old. And I think it is up to us to create the future that we want to see in Scotland, because it is possible. If we truly want to see Scotland as an independent country, then we must put all our efforts in securing an SNP majority in May. Thanks a lot for listening. Cheers. Questions then, shall we?
Yeah. From the room, we can see if there's any online. Anybody got any? Yes, go on.
We made the point earlier that Labour are going down that same tired road of vote SNP, get Tory, and they're even going so far back to invoke the ghost of Thatcher in this one. The one, it's not really a question, it's more of a request that I think we should actually get the figures out on election pamphlets and literature. I'm particularly thinking from 1979. Anytime I've decided for this election, if I get any Labour person coming up to me giving me that line, I'm just going to say, right, explain to me 1979, 83, 87, 92 and 2010. Well, I know you said 1955 onwards. I think it's only really in the time from Thatcher onwards where the Labour vote was overwhelming in Scotland. Not just a majority, it was overwhelming. We all remember the feeble 50. You know, I think we should get that into a pamphlet form that we can hand out to people. Well, there's the figures. This is what they're saying. You vote SNP, you're going to get Tories. Well, there you go. 44 Labour MPs, 50 Labour MPs, 41 the last time. Tories. I think if we can get that into the election literature, we can make a stronger case and blow this lie right out of the water.
I definitely agree with that. I think there might also be a tendency for people to say, if you tell them that, they might say, oh well, if we vote SNP, what's the difference? It'll just be the same. We'll still get Tories anyway. But I think it's important to hammer forward that the facts of, we could hold the balance of power with an SNP majority in a way that we couldn't with a Labour majority. We've seen that by voting Labour for all these years, and since 1955, and obviously the more recently when we've had a significant majority, we've seen that doesn't make a difference. That we're still going to get Tories either way. So if someone really does want to see a government that's different than just the standard old Tory, then we have to vote SNP. It's really the only realistic option.
Plus the other thing is, to me, to most is in here, a Labour government these days, it's not a Clement Attlee Labour government again.
Yeah.
That should also be made prominent. Let's say to these people, well, Labour, I mean, what sort of Labour Party? Is that a good thing? No. It's just Labour name only now.
Exactly.
We emphasise that to these people.
Yeah, we have it on the again on the doors. I'll take the point on literature, and we'll have a look at producing some material wise that goes out.
That extension Labour in name only is quite a nifty, quite a pithy description. Labour in name only.
Oh, let's get Tories who get Labour in, and
well, what's a conversation on the doors? One of the bits there is obviously we've had that with Labour for forever and a day, and we still have horrendous mortality rates. We still have dismal poverty rates. We still have children in Scotland. I mean, for goodness sake, a country with our wealth, and we still have the rate of children being born into poverty it's slightly, there's policies there to improve that slightly, but there's no gain to be had from reverting to what we had before. There's especially no gain to be had from sticking with that on the premise that it is the Labour of old. I mean, one of the most common bits on the door when somebody says they're voting to me for Labour is I'll ask them what the two main Labour policies are that they believe in.
They have two policies.
that they align with and whatever, and most folk can't tell you. It's still stuck until last year, especially. It was still stuck in my dad voted Labour, my granddad voted Labour, my mum votes Labour.
Stick a red rosette on a hat stand, I'll vote for it.
Yeah, but I genuinely believe there's a movement away from that. The energy and the interest and the engagement that came from last year, there's a movement away from that people, I mean, I said the statistic from yesterday, that people are thinking about it. People really are fed up with it, and there's a direct link in people's heads now between Labour and the Tories. Partly because their policy's not that much different, and secondly because they stood side by side, propping each other up last year, and they danced up and down and they sang together and they did a jig in places when they saw the results coming in, and people now are viewing them as one and the same.
Yeah, I think even down in England that UKIP are going to hoover up a lot of the ex-Labour people as well, so it's maybe worth throwing in on the doorstep that if you fancy a Tory UKIP coalition running the country, because I'm sure most people here run a mile. It's always worth throwing that in along with it.
I think we still should be more on what we're going to do. I don't want to end up being like the Labour Party saying, just attacking Labour all the time as they attack us.
I think you have the statistics.
I think that's if they're going to go down the road of voting, vote SNP, you get Tory. Well, sorry mate, that's not the truth.
I think having the statistics on the leaflet's a good idea, but I think also informally there's no harm in just sowing that seed, because it's a likely outcome. Tory UKIP coalition running this country, then we'll turn into a fascist state, basically. So it's worth, not having it on the leaflets, but sowing a bit a wee bit.
Okay, thanks.
I was just going to say exactly the same. The general election is quite different from a referendum. But the message from a referendum was positivity, and we
losing sight of that. You know, spending all your time demolishing the other team's arguments, more like we're so far. SNP are about strength and hope, and that's a message you've got to keep getting in front of the electorate. It's interesting hearing it, the policy has been vote SNP and get the Tories. That's not what Labour have been saying. They've been saying vote SNP and get Cameron. But they've just discovered now that Cameron is more popular in Scotland than Miliband.
Yeah.
So they're changing the policy to now.
Because then you think, if I can vote Thatcher again, that's basically
What we should be saying is vote SNP, strength, hope, get forward. You're right, we need to know definitive SNP policies on the doorstep. If you're asking to put Labour's too many policies, we've got to know what the SNP are. Neil and Sam can answer that today. That's the way we're going. We've got to keep the referendum spirit there, which recognise it's a general election this time, slightly different, but stay positive.
Yeah,
If I can ask on the national, Neil, you mentioned the national, I get the national when I get it digitally. And it just occurred to me, you said leave it lying around the buses. Can you actually forward it? You know, you get it, pick it up. Can you not? Like, you can't send it to somebody else? No? Oh, well, just a thought.
Not that I'd advocate it, because I'm sure there's technical reasons that you shouldn't do it, but your only means of doing it would be to screen dump a Photoshop of it off your screen and then send an individual article or something like that. You know,
That's going to creep to me, so.
I do. I do. Of course, don't I?
You do.
Every page.
I'd like to pick up on what you said as well about, you know, the positivity aspect, and I definitely think that's really something that is unique to the SNP really, and it's sad to say that it is unique to the SNP, but it is, because when you hear Labour talk, it's always vote SNP, get Tories, Miliband, whichever one it is that week. It's never anything positive. It's never, you know, vote Labour so we can build a better, fairer, more equal country, socially just country. It's always doom and gloom, and I think people will respond more to positivity, will respond more to the positive aspects that were turned up during the referendum campaign. You're right, we definitely need to use that for the SNP.
You think Labour would have learned after the last two Scottish elections?
I think
So the SNP attack and yet they're still going in the same way. But it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think vote-wise it probably is. I mean, it was the day after Jim Murphy was made the leader, and he pulled out the old folder and he gave nigh on the identical speech, whether we need to listen to people and so on and whatnot. It was, if it wasn't the same speech edited, it was clearly by the same person, because it was the same jargon, it was the same phraseology in it, and that's just lip service. You know, that's not really anything constructive. There's nothing there that people are going to think, oh, that's right, great, he's listening to us now. But the longer they spend their time doing that, the better as far as we're concerned, and we can get out and actually put the message out of what we are doing, what we hope to do, and what the plan for looking after the priorities of Scotland are. I mean, it shouldn't ever be a policy announcement for a Scottish party to say that they're going to make decisions in the best interests of Scotland. That would be natural, wouldn't it? That would be your start point, not a policy announcement that you're going to start making decisions for the people of Scotland.
One other thing we should be doing, and that is immediately say we will not go into coalition with Labour.
Yeah.
And Neil made that a point saying that we haven't actually said that yet, but we should. It should be very clear, because there's no greater lost leader than saying you go into coalition with any other party. Supplying confidence is the way forward, absolutely, and we should be categoric in that, because there's no point in decrying Labour, putting all their weaknesses and say, well, we're going into bed with them. You know, we'll support them, we'll take them through. Right away, we should be absolutely clear. We will be able to work for Labour, and supplying confidence, we will not go into coalition. It's been disaster for Lib Dems.
Yeah, I agree.
Plus, if you say that beforehand, then people might think, well, what's the point of voting SNP? We'll just vote Labour, if that's what you're going to do anyway.
Yeah.
Well, there's still an argument there that says if Labour get in, they are not going to push for further powers. That's the big difference within that bit, is if you vote SNP and you have an SNP
and Labour confidence and supply arrangement, the SNP is constantly going to be negotiating for policy, benefits, procedure, whatever, that are in Scotland's interests. If you just vote Labour and you get Labour, we will get nothing. It's not going to happen. I mean, we saw it last year from the vow with the big blast across the front page, and then Gordon Brown led the way, only to find out by 11 o'clock on the 19th he's starting banging on about, somebody sign my petition please, I've got a petition here, we need to get the vow sorted out. It's not going to happen.
You see on TV this week, did you see him saying that the vow was only a timetable? Yeah, and nobody challenged him. He actually said, the guy said it'll be as near as federal as possible. On television this week was allowed with very responsibly to get away with saying, oh, but the vow was only a timetable. That's all it was, we delivered the timetable.
But equally, Mark MacDonald was on Call K. And in Call K, I can't forget who the Conservative MSP that was on, I think it was a Conservative MSP that was on, was allowed to blush over the bit when Kay Adams said, nobody ever used the word home rule. And it was allowed to go. I think Mark's pretty astute and he's quick. And I think he was just that struck by the audacity of the claim, where you're kind of sitting thinking, hang on a minute. And it was allowed to let go.
That's what they have said since that Smith Commission came out. This is home rule. We have delivered home rule.
Yeah. I mean, there's enough big articles of it. There was articles from Edinburgh MPs and things like that in the Scotsman, the Evening News, on it saying, right, we've now delivered on the vow, let's move on. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Yes, Pat?
I belong to the Women for Independence movement. I got an email from them a couple of days ago about proposals that they had asked all candidates for Parliament to look on to not personalise the campaign, to not disrespect where possible individuals. You can criticise the party at all you want, but to try not to stew in and be critical of individual candidates, because if you're wanting women's votes, that kind of thing can put women off. Is that something that the SNP are going to be trying to do?
Yeah, I think you're right to say it's difficult to avoid it. But equally, that's why before I started talking about his voting record, I pointed out I don't know Ian Murray. So what I was saying is not personal comment on Ian Murray. And at that level, it's really difficult to avoid, because ultimately an MP's job is to stand up and look out for his constituents.
This is maybe a silly point, but is it not easy to say the MP for Edinburgh South has done this rather than mention them by name? Does that make a difference? Because a lot of women, according to statistics, are put off when you start name calling them.
I don't think it's we have to defend ourselves. We have to correct errors, as we say. We can't just let things go. No, I know, but I think it's more, we don't want to be attacking, but we have to defend.
Yeah,
you know, and
it's just a point
just with facts.
Yeah.
And never emotively, but just with facts.
It's definitely something we have to watch, because there is it's not actually within the party culture to focus on the individual. Anyway, it is a very big tactic that's much more familiar down south, and the spin and media departments that go on down there will try to discredit the person more so than the policy or whatever that's on around it. It's definitely something we have to watch, but I don't think it's not a natural position for us to take party-wise and candidate-wise. And the other thing also to remember is there's a lot of, certainly the people selected, there's quite a lot of the candidates have come in on the back of Yes, and where we were in Yes was all positive on the message, etc., and not focusing on the individuals.
What's the cover story on the Sunday Herald today? Is that about Labour stealing Yes ideas or something? You have seen that? Anyone?
Stealing the word Yes?
Just the one.
Just you want to steal the word?
Steal the word. The sales. We can't.
Yes for Labour.
I haven't read it. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it. No, but I can
Yes,
imagine.
for Labour is for the government.
Really?
Yes, for Labour.
Have you got the paper there? I've got it here.
It's Murphy.
Yes,
Murphy the same.
one of his cohorts, it said here, Daniel Johnson, the party's Holyrood candidate in Edinburgh South, he's actually registered a batch of websites as part of the project, including Yes for Labour, Yes for Scottish Labour, Yes Scottish Labour, Yes Labour. So he's registered them just in the chance that we'll choose one.
Right.
Then they get yes.
That's quite something.
I
Right?
fear it might be a wee bit too late. I fear that perhaps Yes has such a strong brand already towards the independence movement. But with regard the thought that goes behind that, don't know.
Just as a question just about numbers really, you know, for the wider audience watching at home, where do the numbers grow from like so the 18th of September in the local branch to what you have now as membership?
As a constituency, we had 346 on the 18th of September, and we now have just on 1,400. For that's within the Holyrood constituency. It changes slightly for the Westminster one, but the branch network's based on Holyrood, so it's just under 1,400.
And this weekend, now this is across Scotland, do you get any idea how many Yes stalls were set up in towns and cities across Scotland?
Not yet, not yet. Constituency-wise, we had 5. We had five different teams out across the weekend, but one of them's today. So we had 5 from the constituency alone, teams out, and I think that will be replicated all the way across. Now that all the candidates were decided upon this week and that the full team is there, this was what was called the day of action that kick-started the campaigns. But with regard numbers of teams that were out, I don't know that information. An awful lot of online activity that supported it, but
right. And there's a question from me, just on a sort of a personal question really. When you won the selection race, did you have a sort of sudden gulp that your head was now really above the parapet and you're going to be under scrutiny, and you know, what does that feel like?
There was no gulp. Without being remotely complacent, I was out, you know, on that time campaigning for myself basically. I was out every single day to make sure that I won the selection, but I was quietly confident of doing so. So it wasn't there was no surprise element to it as such that I'd won it. I'm quite an unassuming person who doesn't. I don't have a radical, revolutionary frontline edge to me that people can dredge up and
You've no tweets about football teams.
Well, it's difficult to avoid. I'm an Aberdeen fan, and it's difficult to occasionally avoid that sneaking in. So, but I don't think there's anything risky in any of it. There's a fair old, to become the candidate, there's a vetting done on you to reach the stage of being an approved candidate. So, you know, if there was anything glaring or untoward that you were doing ongoing, you would be raised. So if you don't have anything raised, then I think more or less you're okay.
Right. Thanks.
You don't think you're too nice at times, Neil?
Yes.
You know, it's going to get dirty in the next 2 or 3 months, but you're very nice to everybody and laid back. I know you do all the work underneath that. That's for certain. I've witnessed that through the India campaign. But sometimes, you know, you're too nice.
I suppose it's a nice problem to have.
It is, yeah.
I could campaign with an edge. We can change focus, etc. It wouldn't be my natural disposition, but I suppose a lot of that is going to be driven by how the campaign goes. But my inclination would be not to be dragged to that, and to remain on the upbeat, to remain promoting the positive, remain promoting the difference that me as one of a number of MPs getting to Westminster can make for addressing Scotland's priorities. That it'll all remain positive and on the front foot. But if we have to react to something to defend, or if it particularly benefits the campaign to be slightly more on the front foot, then we'll do it.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either, being too nice. I think that's something, like you said, it's goes hand in hand with the whole positivity and hopefulness that we can draw from the Yes campaign. I think that should be just a prerequisite for a politician, is to be nice and to be be able to engage in people in a nice manner. And I think that's a good thing, a growing quality in a politician.
One of the other bits is, in the candidates that have come through for selection this time, is a move away from the career politician. And it's a personal opinion, it's not a party stance, but one of the things that I believe politics suffers from is that cycle of you become an intern, then you get a job paid with somebody in one of their offices, then you get into the branch network, then you become selected, and lo and behold, then you're standing for MSP, MP, council, or whichever it is. And I think that within that environment there might be the tendency to get wrapped up too much in what a media department might tell you or say, whereas I genuinely think this time, when you look at the calibre of people who have come forward, who have stood and been unsuccessful, never mind the ones who've been successful, that I think it is all to the good for politics in Scotland that we have a diversity of professions, we have a diversity of natures, of attitudes, and I think that's all to the good. And certainly the life that I've led and where I've led it and whatever, I have a huge wealth of and variety of experience that I think probably leads itself to certainly in the last few years my demeanour, my nature might be slightly calmer, slightly less reactive on occasions than I might have been before. My dad's sitting in this room, he's not nodding or shaking his head at the moment, so I don't know if he agrees with me or not. But it's something I'm mindful of, that on occasion I can deal with things, I might have to deal with things slightly out with my normal nature.
At a constituency level, what will be the opportunities for the candidates on a platform? Who would organise such a thing? Do we have to request that, or to get you in the same room with you, Murray?
Anyone, well, there's more than just me and Ian. Anyone can look to put on a hustings. I know from communication that during the referendum that others would only come forward if it seemed to be arranged through the church network. I don't know why that particular network, but anybody can look to put on a hustings, and you just have to then go and invite the candidates, and it's up to them to see if they're free, whether they want to do it, whether they can commit to it, but anybody can do it.
In the general election there was something like 12,000 plus votes Labour, 12,000 plus votes Lib Dem, and 3.5 was it for SNP. Changed completely a few months later when Jim Eadie's elected. So what's it, the main target clearly must be that 12,000 Lib Dems must be available, and probably the 12,000, maybe 4,000 Labour votes, that's 16,000. How are we going to get there? How are we going to get them across?
There is a distinction between. I'm sorry, I'm getting all the questions here. There's a distinction between the stats and the figures that we look at from 2011, from the ones of the general election of 2010. There was a big movement that obviously meant Jim Eadie got in. Jim would probably agree that he wasn't expected to get in by anybody at that stage, and Labour and the Lib Dems went to town on each other, and he ran a good solid campaign, and he snuck through the middle when neither were looking. There was a big drop in the Lib Dem vote between 2010 and 2011, but it was still a big figure. We have a number of policies just now that more or less fit exactly with what the Lib Dems stood for back in 2010, through the EU, through fracking, through some of the green issues, but home rule and federalism was one of their big things, and that is exactly what we are, campaigning front and centre for. More powers there. So we have a big opportunity there to get to the Lib Dem vote that still remains. It's a really disillusioned, it's a really soft vote out there for the Lib Dems. When it came into 2010, it was very much they were viewing it. It was either you were voting Lib Dem or Labour. There was no sort of allegiance there. There was no pairing up there at all that came about from last year. I don't think, in the information of polling that we've got, I don't think there's any great bond between the Lib Dems and then the Lib Dems staying with Labour based upon the fact that they're a no vote. I think the Lib Dems as a group of all the opposition parties will get that this is about home rule, and we just need to focus on getting the message to them. They're difficult to identify, they don't all wear the same hat or anything like that, but it just has to go across the breadth in our message. But it's not too dissimilar a message than that will get the soft Labour vote as well. So we campaign, it's a natural way of getting them, because that is our message. We're not manufacturing a message specifically to suit them that's different from elsewhere in the constituency. We actually have quite a few Conservative voters who are on record as thinking that they might vote SNP this time, just based upon those greater powers.
Sam, you mentioned the connection with the younger group. Is that the same? Has there been any younger switching since the referendum?
Yes, I think there has been, definitely. Yeah, there's been a lot of, personally I've been involved in the SNP students a lot, and more so recently than ever. I definitely think there has, yeah.
One other area is that we should look at, sorry about hogging this, but is it the opposite side, the bit that was down the referendum was over 55s who were very solidly no. I think some of them maybe changed their mind when they realised that Gordon Brown's scare stories about pensions were unfounded. They actually would have been better off than an independent Scotland pension was. I was 5 hours on duty at the Reid Memorial polling station. Was dumbfounded about the number of golden oldies who were trotted out in wheelchairs, arrived in coaches. So there was a huge push to get them out, clearly because I think they were a no vote. I'm quite willing, if somebody can identify all the retirement homes in Edinburgh South, to get 2 or 3 people and try and get in there and talk to the older voter.
We're in the throes at the moment of communication to try and make sure that we get fair and equal access to them. We've had a lot of bother in the past accessing the retirement homes and sheltered housing complexes. We also have there's a wee team of musicians actually go in, and they go in, and part of the programme when they go in is they go in to entertain them in principle, and then the part of it obviously is the opportunity to speak to them about it as well. So we tend to have to think slightly round the houses to get access and get in. Even materials, when we want to go and deliver to them, historically we've had a problem, so they become a postage cost to us to get into them. But I will take you up on that and put you in touch with the people who do the music side of it for the entertainment side of things as well.
After the 25th of March, we'll get them in next door, isn't it?
Aye.
What about getting them to the polling booths, you know? Is there any plans in the pipeline for helping people to get there to make them up?
Yeah, we'll do. We do usually run a lift service to the polling stations. This time round, it's actually used a lot less these days because of postal votes. So we don't encourage postal votes to the extent certainly that Labour do, but they're increasingly popular now. And aside from that, whenever we canvass, we do offer lifts, etc., to polling stations too.
And also keep an eye on who's counting the postal votes as well, if we've got any players there. That would be handy.
Yes.
Neil, after the referendum, there's a lot of talk about the Yes Alliance.
Yeah.
I don't really see it as strong as what I had hoped it would be. And clearly the SNP are going all out, which I agree with, to get strong candidates in every constituency. Is there talk, between SNP, Holyrood and other parties? Is Nicola bringing heads together, or is that not really the case?
At the moment, it's my understanding it's not really the case.
Yeah.
It was there as an idea immediately after, and I understand why some of the parties felt that's not for us, because if you take the Greens for example, the Green weren't an out and out yes. They had yes and they had no. So within the Greens who were voting no, you're then asking them a bit of a stretch there to say we will not field candidates in certain areas just because it's a pro-independence pact, when they didn't want independence in the first place. So they were in an awkward position as well. The Scottish Socialist Party were all out. They were pro Yes Alliance unequivocally, and there was, as far as I understand, there was some talks, even when the SNP weren't part of that, there was some talks that they might work with the Greens, but I don't know to what extent and how far that got. I just know now it's not on the table. And obviously, we as a party, we changed and amended the rules slightly to allow people who just joined to come and stand, etc. So within that, there was certainly the encouragement for some of the people who came to the Yes movement as well.
Yeah, I completely agree as well. I think the whole stance on the Yes Alliance as well, with the Green Party and everything, like Neil said, there was elements of the Green Party who were no supporting as well. So for them to embrace the supporting SNP, I think that would be a bit of a push. But I think initially I was quite positive towards the whole Yes Alliance idea, but I think really it's not going to be the best altogether because of the Greens and elements of them support no one. I think it's important as well that we have to support the SNP completely now. I think
we're confident as well. I've certainly noticed from Facebook there's a lot of Greens who are talking about voting SNP without being cajoled or
tactical voting elements.
So I think a lot of them probably will see it as a tactical vote because some of them may want independence.
Yeah, where we need to watch is where the Greens say they might field a candidate, as to whether the Lib Dem vote goes to the Greens there, and that could impact on us. Whilst there won't be there won't be other parties could win necessarily in certain seats. Where the vote goes could impact on who does win quite significantly.
One of the messages we could get out clearly is that this election is first past the post, because the Greens may be confused with proportional representation and thinking if they get a lot of Green votes they'll get seats. We'll just actually take votes away from SNP here. So I think we're going to miss it's the first past the post this time round. By all means vote Green in 2016.
Exactly, I think that's true as well as the proportional representation aspect of it is if you are going to vote Greens and you're an independent supporter, I don't think this election is the best election to do it, like you said, because it's first past the post, so in an area where it's likely it's going to go either SNP Labour, a vote for Green in that sense is relatively futile until...
First.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm saying to all the Green people I know, I'm saying to them, trying to persuade them to make that tactical move.
Sorry, I've just got a couple of questions to ask about registering to vote. First of all, there's the confusion about whether or not you're still registered to vote. Is there a number that you can phone to double check that you are?
Yes, there's
yes.
the website as well. Off the top of my head I can't remember it, but I can... Is it to answer somebody just now?
It's
or?
just like generally for people...
I think it's just direct up, just like the government website, register to vote. There'll be a number or even an email in there that you can look at, I imagine.
Thank you. And the other one was as well, there was talk about stopping people, you know how during the YES campaign there was people getting people to register to vote, and they were talking about not allowing that. Has anything happened with, do you know what I mean? They were saying they weren't going to let the people that were encouraging people to register to vote to basically register for them. Do you know what I mean?
The householder, the main householder?
No, the YES campaign was getting people to register to vote, but they were talking about stopping that from being allowed. And before you didn't have to.
I've been registered once, and I've got a letter from the Registrar Commission, and I have to fill in again more details and actually sign it.
Okay, and you didn't have to sign it before? Okay, sorry, thank you.
Yes.
Can I get appreciation for getting the Westminster information out here so you can speak with all the noise and all the baying outside? I thought I was pretty good. Do apologise, we are open doors.
Jenny.
Some good canvases here, by the way. I've got a sheet out here if anybody wants it.
Jenny, you going?
No, there's nothing from people at home. I think that's the trouble hearing actually, and
Well, they're good. Sorry.
no, that's okay. It's just I suppose in an acoustic environment, when we're talking around the room, it can be hard sometimes for the microphone to pick up everybody.
Okay, thank you.
The great thing about the referendum was, quite honestly, the grassroots movement. It merged with the political parties and really created a massive power. That's going to have to be rekindled now. Thankfully, that covered all age groups, and particularly the young element as well. So, it's really important, Sam, that you stimulate all your friends and just try and grow that grassroots movement, because hopefully it's going to swing into motion fairly soon. I mean, it's definitely there. I can feel it on the website and everything else. But as a general election, I don't think it's going to be quite as powerful. But hopefully we can get as much of that previous power as possible, because we're not going to get the media on the SNP side. I mean, the Daily Mail this week has been terrible. Not that I buy it, but my wife used to buy it for the crossword only, and I used to read the score. But it's banned now. But I saw an extract last week, and it's just dreadful. It's full of lies. Now, if you multiply that across a lot of the media, we're going to be up against it. So the grassroots movement's going to have to work. But thankfully, we've got such a nice broad spectrum of candidates now for SNP. A lot of them from the grassroots movement. Hopefully that's going to be a strength for us this time round.
Yeah, I definitely agree
Some
with you.
the young element, definitely we need that to really kick in. So
I think
it's great that you're here today, and that I know you've been to quite a few rallies. In fact, Neil, that's a big one for you, because when you win in May, In 5 years' time, young Sam's going to be knocking on your door to vacate that seat. Definitely.
Top at the top, isn't it?
What was it turnout in 2010? Do you know?
I do remember off the top of my head.
It would have been low to be 50 plus, I would guess.
Yeah.
So that's a huge opportunity as well. You get that turnout up to 75%.
And going back to what you said about the grassroots movement, the young people, I think that's going to be a main factor in this general election, because it's something we've never really seen it before. I mean, I personally haven't. It's just the all ages getting involved. I mean, here we've got 3 generations of SNP members. My grand's here, my mum's here, my dad's here, and I'm here. And so I think that the grassroots movement spans across the whole spectrum. And personally, on an education level, I've seen there's a lot of these the Scottish Nationalist student associations appearing. I've recently started one for Edinburgh College, and I know there's many around different universities, and they're thriving now as a result of the referendum and the grassroots movement that you mentioned. So that's definitely going to go a long way to getting the message of the SNP out there to the younger voters.
I'd just like to add to that. I think what's on our side as well for carrying on momentum is it's a general election, and the issues on a general election to Westminster government, that's in the constitution, etc. We're really fortunate in that way that it's not a council election we're coming up to, where we might have lost a lot of that momentum. So it's a natural progression to carry on.
A lot of the issues are similar to as they were in the referendum, so we can just build on them. Yeah, I agree.
I think as well, generally younger people are more educated by the social media, and they're more drawn to that positive approach and that calm, assertive approach that you were talking about, rather than what we're used to doing in Westminster is the spitting and the snarling and the personal stuff, So that's where we'll draw them in as well with that approach.
Neil, you've been watching that programme documentary about Westminster. Does it not fill you with dread?
And it just confirms it's such an opportunity to change, to bring change. Obviously, as one person, if you're going into somewhere, then that'd be pretty difficult. But given the numbers that we hope we're going to take down there and go down there, then we'd be optimistic of some change coming.
If we get 50 MPs and they turn up every day, they'll outnumber the rest of the people.
Well, they had a fantastic debate this week about voter registration and engaging people in the voting process. That between the debate there was 4 or 5 people in the chamber. So 4 or 5 people engaged in the debate about engaging people in voting.
The thing is, we get no respect in Westminster at all as a party, so if we can get 30, 40, 50 SNP and just be disruptive, I think that's a really positive thing.
That will send a clear message, like you said. We're not taking seriously.
In a positive way, but
I was watching a video on YouTube the other day. It was an SNP member stood up to speak, and then there was an eruption of people shouting Sean Connery over and over again down in Westminster. So some of you've seen that, but that's what's going on down there. But I doubt they'll be doing that if there's 40 to 50 SNP members sitting there. It'll be a very different case indeed.
I mean, a lot of comments are very personal as well. Both sides of the comments.
Would they do that to an MP who's a Muslim or
exactly,
from maybe Polish or something, or anything? But a Scots MP, especially an SNP, will step
well, this is the chance.
Sean Connery and all that.
Would they do that to an Aberdeen supporter?
I'm sorry.
Okay, folks, I think we're probably coming round into conversation now, as opposed to questions, etc. So if there's nothing else coming down questions-wise,
no.
Then I will say thank you very much to Sam for coming and supporting and speaking today, and thank you very much to you all for
thank you guys.
Coming.
Congratulations again, Neil, for
thank you.
Thank you.